Dave Gallup, who was born in Jackson, Michigan on November 29, 1932. And yes, that means he will be turning 90 this November. But you'd have a hard time believing it if you had an opportunity to sit and talk with him or to see him in action. In fact, Dave is one of the stars on our Rotary flag route. After serving in the U.S. Army, Dave spent his pre-Rotary years in Worcester as a biology teacher and basketball coach at Worcester High School, where he taught and coached several members of this club during the late 50s and the 1960s. Unfortunately, time will not permit me to share Dave's stories about the youthful indiscretions of some of these students. You know who you are. But as much as Dave enjoyed teaching and coaching, teachers were not terribly well paid in those days, and with a growing family, he needed to supplement his income. Dave found his calling with his in-laws' concessionaire business, traveling the county fair circuit in Michigan and Ohio, selling cotton candy and candy apples, mostly when school was not in session. But he really upped his game when he took out a six-figure loan in the early 70s to purchase an electronic portable shooting gallery. At 25 cents for 15 shots, the shooting gallery netted $1,000 a day, and that loan was paid off in record time. By then, Dave had left the teaching profession to try his hand at selling real estate. And several fortuitous things happened. For one, Dave's boss suggested he go to auctioneer school, which Dave was more than happy to do since he'd been perfecting his auctioning skills since the age of 12. Secondly, Rotarian Clifford Morrison offered to get Dave into the best service club in town. So Dave became a Worcester Rotarian in February of 1971. Now, Dave will tell you that he gained far more from being a Rotarian than he gave, but I'll let you be the judge of that. What Dave gained was connections with fellow Rotarians and others he met through Rotary who sent business his way and helped him develop a very successful career as an appraiser and auctioneer of both real estate and antiques and collectibles. Dave had been a Rotarian for just 5 years when he approached then President Roger Cook with an idea. Ever the entrepreneur, Dave was convinced that there was money to be made in a large-scale antiques and collectibles auction, something that no one near Worcester was doing at that time. Realizing that what he had in mind would require a massive amount of organization and expertise, a very large venue, and a whole lot of manpower, he pitched the idea to Roger as a Rotary project, but warned him that if Rotary wasn't interested, he intended to do it himself. Well, Roger quickly got back to Dave with an affirmative response, and the Worcester Rotary Consignment and Collectibles Auction was born. The auction was an unparalleled success, not only as the club's primary fundraiser for the next 39 years, but as an important service to the community and to antiques dealers and collectors far and wide. It was also an irreplaceable source of camaraderie and fond memories for the club's members. And even their families. Keep in mind, there were no Rotarians were known at that time, worked alongside their husbands to make the auction successful, as well as a good place to eat. Rotary kids also got in on the action. Ask Joy Schmitz, and probably a number of others in this room, why they decided to become Rotarians. And you might learn that their love of Rotary began while working at the auction when they were kids. In addition to his role as father of the Rotary auction, Dave served as president of the club from 1988 to 89. And he also happened to be president of the Worcester City School Board and the Greater Ohio Showmen's Association that year. Dave was married to Lois for 57 years prior to her passing in 2013.
one of the company stores in Akron, Harold Friedlander, over a game of golf, asked John to come into the Friedlander store and meet with his dad, Herman. John was then hired as a salesman in the men's department and spent many years there. As a side note, we used to have a fashion show once in a while here for one of our new meetings, and I think, John, you were a model for some of that, as I recall. John married his wife, Jan, in 1975, and she was then employed at the Johnston Miller Insurance Agency here in Worcester. In 1977, they purchased the agency and ran it successfully for 25 years before selling it to Darren Campbell. During his career, John also was a member of other service clubs such as the JCs and the 2030 Club. He has served on the YMCA board and has volunteered at Westview Healthy Living, where he's helped patients with various matters, and he also served on that board. John has enjoyed a variety of rich experiences in Rotary. He has especially liked sitting and talking with many different members of the club. And he also has fond memories of working the auctions, Dave, where he spent time with club members and of course met many Worcester folks as they came to the auction. John says he will treasure his years as a member of Rotary and looks forward to many more with our club. Congratulations, John.
Dave and John, thank you for your service to the community through Rotary. One more round of applause for these two gentlemen. We're moving on in the program. I'm going to ask past President Adam Starr to come up to the podium for our new member induction.
Would the following Rotarians please come forward? Dawn Burkhart, Mary Beth Burns, Tim Fox, Melanie Garcia, Mariah Hinton, Heather Howley, Bradley Ian Antuano, Ben Mayball, Vince Marion, Matt Martin, Jarish Rajeshikara, Natalie Ramsire, Ken Schaefer, Larry Smucker, Gabe Tudor, and Amy Welty. You guys just stand over here by the piano. As these Rotarians are coming forward, I would like to thank all the sponsors for another great class of new Rotarians. We often don't get to hear everyone's classification speech because maybe you were missing that day. So I may just have each of you, we'll pass the mic down the line, just say your name and where you work. Just something simple, like if our distinguished past secretary was here, he may say, I'm Tim Swift, work at Worcester Brush, and no one knows what I do there.
I work at Worcester Brush. I also don't know what to do.
Don Burkhart and
Hi, Vince Marion, City of Worcester,
I'm Natalie Ramsire. I work at Certified ADC, and I am glad that my name's not Swift anymore, so not everyone can.
my name is Matt Martin. I'm the Wayne County Secretary Treasurer.
On behalf of Worcester Rotary, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to an organization that is truly international in scope. By accepting your invitation to join this organization, you will benefit on two different levels. First, you have a seat at the lunch table in Worcester each Monday for an hour of fellowship. Second, and perhaps more importantly, you have a seat at the table in an organization that is truly changing our world. As you no doubt have already learned, the Worcester Club does not view itself as merely a luncheon gathering. It is the work we do outside these four walls that defines our club and supports Rotary's mission of service above self. As you can tell from the commitment of our members, being a Rotarian is not about what Rotary can do for you. Rather, Rotary provides a platform for you to use your gifts and talents in local and international service. The membership of the Worcester Rotary Club believes you are ready to meet these high standards. So now I must ask that you give affirmative answers to the following questions. Do you promise to attend the meetings of this club as faithfully as circumstances will permit?
I do.
And do you promise to undertake such committee assignments as may from time to time be given to you?
Yes.
Do you, the members of Worcester Rotary, accept into membership Don Burkhart, Mary Beth Burns, Tim Fox, Melanie Garcia, Mariah Hinton, Heather Howley, Bradley Ian Ansuano, Ben Maple, Vince Marion, Matt Martin, Jarish, Roger Shakara, Natalie Ramsire, Ken Schaefer, Larry Smucker, Kate Tinker, and Amy Wilson. Photo with President Terry, if you don't mind. Yeah. That's on this side.
All right, well, welcome to all of our guests today. We hope that you enjoyed today's program, which I know you will, and the Fellowship of Worcester Rotary. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Don Noble to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you, President Terry. Rod Welker, a human relations expert, offers a unique blend of corporate, higher education, and nonprofit leadership and administration. Rod has a vast experience in leading and empowering others, maximizing their potential and performance. Traveling across the country, Rod facilitates leadership development for companies and organizations and provides executive coaching for top execs as well as emerging leaders. He has more than 35 years of leading and educating employees and students and has taught collegiate classes in business, leadership, and adult development. His experience also includes 7 years as a college basketball coach. As president of Eagle Advisors Group, Rod is a licensed professional business coach and a certified trainer facilitator, providing one-on-one advising, group and executive coaching, workshops and seminars on a variety of topics, and is a specialist in executive leadership development and adventure-based team building, which I can attest to. Rod is a member of the West Liberty University Gary E. West College of Business and Wits End Advisory Boards, serves on the board of directors of the Wayne County Community Federal Credit Union, and on the Leadership Worcester Steering Committee for the Worcester Area Chamber of Commerce. Rod is also a member and a past president of the Wayne Area HR Association and currently serves as a lecturer for the OSU Worcester campus. Rod holds a master's degree in student development and higher education administration from the Indiana University of Pennsylvania and a bachelor's degree in business administration from West Liberty University. Rod and his wife Martha live in Worcester and have 3 sons and 5 grandchildren. Now I'm going to go off script just for a minute. It's going to be dangerous, and I promise it'll just be a minute. So in addition, Rod would never tell you this, but he is a minor celebrity. If you go on YouTube sometime,
I don't
search,
know how to fix
I
myself.
am an architect. I am an architect. Search it sometimes. He's one of the main characters in this series of videos. And no, he's not an architect. He just plays one in these videos. If you see, you can even spot downtown Worcester in the first video. And this first video I looked up is now 8 years old and has over 1.2 million views. Think about that, 1.2 million views this man has on YouTube. That's just one of the videos. It's like, what, 7 or 8 now? You're squirming. I think they're really fun. They're great. I encourage you to check them out sometime. They're a lot of fun to watch anyway. And he does a great job. So please give a warm Worcester-worthy welcome to my good friend Rod as he shares with us some ideas on the topic of multi-generational workforce.
And I would have been happy with just, hey, here's Rod. All right. Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Some familiar faces. This is not going to be this formal, right? For those who don't know me. So yes, my name is Rod, and all those things technically are true, but as far as I'm concerned, just being a part of this community, I came back, I was a Smithville Smithy way back in the day, and graduated in 1980. So you can do the math, figure that out. But have lived different places around the country, came back with our 3 sons back to Worcester in 2003. This is the longest we've ever lived anywhere. It's the longest I've ever done anything at one time. And very proud of what you all are doing within this community. So here goes, multi-generations. So this became an interested topic for me. I wanted to learn primarily because I was working with leaders, corporate leaders, organizational leaders. How do we manage, how do we deal with all these generations? And as you already know, there's at least 4 generations in the workplace today, which is a very unusual happening. And for those that still could be in the traditionalist or the silent generation, and actually that's the case for a couple of leaders where Dawn is, that's 5 generations. So very interesting to navigate those waters. And it's not easy. There's differences. But I'm going to give you a spoiler alert in case anybody falls asleep in the next 20 minutes or so. The main thing I want you to get out of this is you see a person as an individual and not as a generation. That is the takeaway, right? We are individuals, we are not a generation. Now there are uniquenesses with each generation, but the main thing is you lean in, you develop that relationship because they're a person. So with that in mind, here we go. So do you do this or do I do that? Oh, the space bar. I did the arrow and the space bar. Okay, boomer. This is just all part of the game. Hey, there we go. Okay. So this is just for fun. You can just shout it out. Letter A. What is letter A? Who says that? Awesome. Did you run one?
Absolutely.
So my dad retired at what we would have known as the joint. He taught at the joint in data processing. And so that would have been a key punch machine that as a kid, I would have gone into the classroom, had a blast with. I love color. So all the cards, right? All different colors, you put them through. And of course, what that creates, a lot of confetti. So what kid wouldn't like a lot of confetti? Letter B, quick. Yeah, now that's interesting. So it is a floppy. The original size of a floppy. Technically, it's 8 inches, yes. And then in the early 70s, they moved it into a 5 1/4. Then in letter C, what is that? That's your 3 1/2. It was a harder case. What company is letter D? Yeah, you almost said right. Yeah, that was our first home computer. I was working at Penn State at the time. Any guess as to how much I paid for that? It was a nice little desktop home computer from Gateway. Yeah, $2,400. This was my first office computer, letter E. Of course, we know that as? Yeah. Lovely screen coloration, right? I mean, it was great. And then finally, letter F. Yeah. And what was the first thing you did after you did all that cha-ching? Wash your hands. No, you smelled them. That's right. Come on now. I convinced one of my classmates, his name was Dick Nicholas. Do you remember Dick Nicholas? Yeah. That it smelled like strawberry, or no, it tasted like strawberry. After you smell it, you need to taste it. He's a very gullible child. And I was a jerk. Okay. All right. So this one, just at your table here, I want you to tell somebody, what was the earliest phone that you remember using? Hopefully it's somewhere on the screen. Anybody knows I have a crank? Now, typically with my audiences, I will have someone that says, you know, because you see the iPhone, right? And they'll say, actually, that's an older edition. I haven't had that yet. I'm like, I started with a Series 7 or whatever they call it. I don't know. iPhone 7 or whatever. But anybody remember a bag phone? We thought we were pretty cool. Yeah. And how long was your kitchen phone? Whether it was the cord, yeah. Whether it was the red one with the rotary dial or the yellow one with the push button, right? I mean, you could go into 3 rooms probably with that stuff. Now I remember, of course, I was in, you know, a little town, right? Party lines. Yeah. So it's always fun, and again, this audience is going to, you know, you know all these things, but you have to know there's a lot of people that when I share this with, they have no idea. I mean, their idea of a party line. I don't think I can share that. Not the same. All right. What is that? If anybody actually knows the name of that, oh, you just made that up. Yes, that goes inside of a 45. Now my parents would have had the 33 and a third, technically. No, I'm sorry. They would have actually had the 78s, which is the upper left-hand corner, the 78s. Then we would have had the 33 and a third, 45s. 8-track. How many people had an 8-track car or 8-track player in their car? Paul, you still do? Probably the safest thing nowadays with teenagers driving is we don't have to worry about all that stuff. When you think about that, right? Tyler took out a mailbox because he was switching out a CD. I won't tell you exactly where because I don't know if he ever told them. You could have owned that. I just thought of that. I shouldn't say anything. Is there any police officers here? Law limitations or something like that. Okay. Now, you remember this, right? Jess. So this particular episode, I did a lot of research on this. What makes this so amazing? This was in 1962. That's the year I was born. And look what's on that, right? And then this is what we have. I mean, back in 1962, that just blows my mind. I mean, that's 60 years ago. Would they have truly known that we would have experienced exactly what they portrayed in that comic? So pretty cool, pretty amazing. Okay, so one more thing for fun. I'm a big cereal guy. At least I grew up on cereal. I think that was my favorite meal. Anytime you had that question, like if there's one food item you could have for the rest of your life, which would it be? For me, it was always cereal. So now this is probably a new box, but I remember growing up, my parents would have had shredded wheat, but it was a brick, about like that big, and you had to break it apart. Grape nuts today are still one of my favorite cereals, and all brand. Our digestive system was amazing. Good old corn flakes. Now these are baby boomer cereals. Then, because I'm a sugarholic. Hi, my name is Rod, and I'm a sugarholic. Hi, Rod. So Cocoa Puffs, thankfully in my era, they still brought in some of the sugar stuff, right? But what was interesting, if you recall, they used sugar in the name of the cereal. It was Sugar Smacks, Super Sugar Crisp. They had to remove those, obviously, years later. Does anybody remember that? Yeah, okay. So this is all baby boomer, and if you can test me on this, but I've checked every single one of when these brand names came out. So baby boomers, now I realize we also have some traditionalists or the silent generation in this room as well. So you're just gonna live through my life vicariously through the baby boomer. But the Gen Xers, if you wanna just show your hands, those are Gen Xers, okay. So this is what you have. Count Chocula, Cookie Crisp, you'll see a trend. Oh, and then Golden Grams. All right. Then for our millennials, and I only had to pick a couple. I couldn't, just for moving along here. Cinnamon Toast Crunch, Smurf Berry Crunch, Honey Bunches of Oats, and then finally this would be some Gen Z cereals. French Toast Crunch, Frosted Toast Crunch, and good old Oreos. Now some of those, they don't even make anymore, by the way. Kind of interesting, they had a short life. So what was would you guess, the brand of the cereal that has lasted throughout the generations? It's as famous today as it was when it first started. Yeah, very good, very good. If you're a mom, you know Cheerios, right? So there you go. All righty, so on more serious stuff, and I'm going to go through these very quickly, right? This is going to be like probably an hour, maybe an hour and 20 minutes, all scrunched into about now 25 minutes, okay? So 23 minutes, so we're going to get it done quickly. I'll hang around if people have some questions and all, but why is this important? Well, I kind of set that up a little bit at the beginning. Here's some statistics. We know baby boomers are retiring. The reality is there's an eligible of 10,000 a day. What we know is that they're retiring slowly. Now, the pandemic also has a major factor in all of this. So just because if you read things that, you know, baby boomers are retiring at the rate of 10,000 a day, that's not necessarily accurate. It's just that they're eligible. We know that millennials now do outnumber and have for probably about the last almost 3 years, millennials to baby boomers. Those next numbers there are pretty interesting. A lot of our folks have older direct reports. With the Gen Z entering the workforce, they're going to also be a huge dynamic. So most of our organizations, even in Wayne County here, if you add the millennial and the Gen Zs, it's over 50% of their workforce. Now, obviously there are exceptions to that. But with the few that I work with and what we know in our statistics, and when we look at demographics, you're looking at the millennial and Gen Zs at over half of the workforce at many of our organizations. So it may not be yours, but know that that's happening and will continue to be the case. So just a couple things on the generations. And again, I can't give you all of the information, but the main thing I want you to pick out is what we know about a generation. Generation obviously is a group of leaders. And they share similar experiences. They grew up with a unique set of exposures, if you will, right? But at the same time, those preferences that they may have were only meant to give us an idea as to what that does as they live their life and how they work and how they consume and decisions they may make. They're not meant to be absolutes. And so what we do know is, yes, we can know people, they have some ideas, but at the very crux of all of this is we're individuals, right? The second thing I want you to know is there are differences. So when you do research, and be careful, there's a break in about 2016, sometimes 2015, and sometimes 2017, depending. But the research prior to that, you're going to get a very skewed view of millennials and Gen Zers. Past that, say 2016, 2017, that data, that raw information is going to be way more valid and way more accurate. So you got to watch. If you do a lot of Googling and you're trying to find out more information about where you work and what does that mean, pay attention to when that research was conducted. Where is that data coming from? Because we've learned, we continue to learn every year. The millennials, we know a whole lot more today than we did literally just 5 years ago. Why? Because they're growing up, they're older. So be cautious of your years, the dates of that particular research. Now, let me go ahead and give you the years here. So traditionalists would be also known as the silent generation, 1928 to 1945. Boomers, 1946 to 1964. Gen X, 1965 to 1980. Millennials, 81 to 96. And then Gen Z, 1997 to 2012. Now, quick comment on the years. Again, depending on what research you're looking at, what data, you will see some of those years, particularly at the ends, be different. So the 1928, 1945 is going to be consistent. 1946 to 1964, I don't know if you can find something that will have a different set of years. At that point, from Gen X on, things could be different. So I've seen Gen X is 65 to 1976, 1979. Millennials, obviously, then starting the year after, 1996, 1997, and then to Gen Z, of course, the year after, whatever that research shows. And then the ending date, that's brought back. In fact, the little postcards that I just shared, if you want to take those, that's fine, as a little bit of resource. You'll find on that, it's a 2014. And we printed those about a year or so ago. So already we're learning when to move those markers in, because what we're looking for when we're talking about generations is as things change in a macro sense. And as things change, then we're going to put that group, that age, into another generation. So, and just so you know, the next generation, any ideas what it's called? Believe it or not, it's going to be, well, they'll have different names for it. So millennials were known first as a Gen Y. So the X, Y, Z, guess what the next generation is going to be? Alpha, Generation Alpha. Now again, they'll probably come up with a code name at some point. So don't get too caught up on those years. It's more about what they represent, okay? All right. So I'm going to probably upset a little bit of folks here with the this idea of what really shapes generations. The number one factor of influence on our generations is what? Parents. So this is where it may be a little bit dicey, right? You know, so when we talk about all those, you know, entitled millennials, don't want to pay their dues, all those things, and the millennials in the room, don't throw anything at me, because I'm actually with you. I'm with you on this one. That came from parents like me, who may have worked really hard for what I've acquired and wanted it to be a little bit easier for my kids. They didn't work quite as hard. And so be careful as we're pointing fingers, and especially when you're thinking in the workforce, you know, you look at that younger person that's working and their attitude or whatever you might think that you see, we're all products, we're all conditioned. So parenting, yes, there's other big influencers like technology, geography, major events, and economics. So, but here's the disclaimer. There's a lot of things where I will say, this is not me. It doesn't represent me. So one very important factor, it's called cuspers. Cuspers would be those individuals that were born either at the beginning or end of those years. So technically, as a 1962 individual, I'm pretty much a cusper. So a lot of it will depend on the fact that I have two older sisters. So my parents were older. So I probably lean more toward a baby boomer kind of characterization, even though I could, if I was the oldest of 3 or 4, I could have leaned more toward the Gen X. Does that make sense? So as you kind of think of where you're born, what year you are, and you remember those years, you can look them on a postcard. If you're toward the ends or beginnings of any of those, that's called a cusper. The other thing that is important is where you grow up. There is a difference between growing up in Smithville, Wayne County, than in Cuyahoga County or Franklin County. Urban versus rural. Growing up on a farm. If you're a military kid, right? if your family or parents owned a business, all of those factors do play in. And so again, some of these character traits that you're going to see that are in your generation may or may not fit, and that's okay. Again, we're individuals, not a generation. So our experiences as we grow up is pretty important. So I'm going to do it real quick. When you look at this list, what generation does that describe? Yeah. That's actually a very good quote with Socrates says. But a lot of those, when you see that, you assume that is the millennial. Guess what? It says baby under the talking. That was a list compiled by, at that time, Life magazine to describe moi. I know, I'm sorry, Greg, but that's just the way it is. and the other thing, I mean, we were the first ones to be known as a me generation. That was our nickname as baby boomers. Sorry, we can't deny it. It's all there. And here's the other thing, real quick, just to let people know about the whole millennial thing. When millennials were seen as, you know, all they can think about is themselves, guess what? At that time, they weren't married, they didn't have any kids. Who else were they supposed to think of or think about? I mean, seriously, so when you look at the millennial generation now, I mean, some of them are 40. It's no longer, you know, all about them, right? For those that are married and have kids and so on. So just be careful. Again, this is the, you know, what I want you to walk away with is we're trying to bridge the gaps within our multi-generational workforce, not continue to divide. Okay, so again, you're not going to be able to see all these real quick, but just know that on this screen here is going to be those things that were kind of the influencers to that particular generation. You can see there yourself, a lot of stuff that was happening that helps kind of create who we are. Those characteristics then come from those influences. The one thing we know, certainly as baby boomers, is we live to work. That's what that work-centric means. And we were very loyal to our children. And again, that plays out for a lot of us baby boomers that birthed millennials. We're very loyal to them. So think about that from a dynamic perspective. And again, what's interesting too, let me pause real quick. A baby boomer today is very different than a baby boomer 10 years ago and 20 years ago, right? I mean, at my age, I'm thinking differently about health, about finishing strong, all kinds of things. This is characteristic of the entire generation throughout, so please keep that in mind. Okay, so what we know about baby boomers is they prefer direct communication typically. Right now, so what I'm talking to you about right now is how can this be helpful to you? Baby boomers in the workforce right now want to be relevant. They want to be valued. Their experience, they want more than just acknowledgement. They want appreciation, and they want to be still involved somehow. So remaining relevant and definitely a little bit more sensitive to retirement. One of the questions you don't ask a baby boomer is, so have you thought about retirement? When are you going to retire? How long have you been working? Right? Okay. So Gen X. Big thing with Gen X, obviously, is a lot of dual income families. So with the mom and dad both working, hence we came up with this phrase, latchkey, right? So they came home from school, both parents were working, he was somewhere or around here, the door's probably unlocked, and you walked in. That's what latchkey came from, that's what it means. Divorce rate started to skyrocket during those years as well. All of that, those are influences, right? Again, keep in mind, in addition to the other things we've talked about. And so that led to a very strong independent generation. Now, if they're parents, we tend to kind of respond based as to our parents. So if our parents, like myself, was all about, you know, working hard, living to work, the Gen X kind of rebounded from that, and it was a little bit more about free time, enjoying. It's not all about work. You gotta, there's more to life. So work-life balance became kind of a thing with this Gen X generation. So because of that work-life balance, we're working with those folks. Flexibility, which again, the whole, you know, flexibility was a conversation even before the pandemic. Pandemic just accelerated that conversation. Keeping it fun and positive, but they are also not as formal typically. And again, remember, there's always exceptions. So millennials, so I have 3 sons, all 3 are millennials, but they're all 3 a little bit different. Millennials is now kind of divided up into 2 different groups, kind of the older millennials and the younger millennials. Maybe you've heard this term called the geriatric millennials, which is kind of a hilarious thing to think about it, geriatric. And all that references is the older millennials. And those older millennials are the ones that are married and have kids and pretty much, you know, found themselves within their community and so on. We still do have some millennials that are, you know, sleeping on the couch somewhere, but most of those folks have found themselves. It's just a little chat there. Okay. Student loan debt is definitely probably weighing heavy, more so obviously with this generation. So talked about the 2 distinct groups. Definitely this group is starting to look at diversity, right? They're a little bit more tolerant. I love this. It says tech savvy or tech dependent. Be careful. Not every millennial knows how to fix your computer, or not every millennial knows how to program, whatever. My mom, who's 89, so she would be a traditionalist in the silent generation, always asked our kids to come over to fix stuff. They're tech dependent, not necessarily tech savvy, okay? All right, so how are we gonna reach our millennials? Flexibility. And again, we created this just prior to the whole pandemic. We know millennials are way more about purpose trumping passion. I want to work for somebody or some place that matters. And you need to help me know what it is that I do and how that matters. Professional, personal development, you know, they want to learn, they don't want to be stagnant. I love this. Want coaches, not bosses. Most of us were led by bosses. It's a distinct mindset difference and ongoing feedback. You know, I got to the point where, hey, no news is good news, right? I'm assuming the feedback I was going to get was probably not good. Very different with the millennials and also the Gen Zers. They want feedback. Okay. So last, then the Gen Zers. Drone parents, that was the whole college admissions scandal. That's what a drone parenting, you've heard helicopter parenting. Drone parenting is just adding a lot of high tech and it's a lot more invisible. So I'm working behind the scenes to help out my kids and make sure I know where they are and what they're doing. So the tracking devices on phones and so on. A lot of stuff that you can see, we know these things. And here's one other thing I want you to think about. Yes, we're still alive, so we experience all this as well. What's different is, as we experience some of these influences as adults, it's very different than when you experience them as a teenager. Okay, so I realize we've lived through all of this. You're still here. Everything you have to put up there on that box there, you have been there, I've done that, I've seen it. But it's different depending on how old you are and where you are. Okay. So finally, with the characteristics of the Gen Z, digital natives. That means from the day they were born, they could have held a phone, an iPhone or a smartphone. That's what digital native means. Very entrepreneurial. They're a little bit more private. In other words, they learned from their millennial older brothers or sisters that maybe you shouldn't put everything out on Facebook. In fact, the Gen Zers could care less about Facebook. Facebook is now mainly for us, old farts. So we can keep track of our grandkids and see pictures and obviously argue about stuff. So you got that one. All right. So Gen Z, multiracial, even more accepting. Again, you're going to see this kind of as a term. So the instant feedback, I mentioned that, honesty and transparency. Gen Zs tend to be very competitive, typically. So that's that entrepreneurial. So give them an opportunity to tackle something. And I know we say, hey, pay your dues, don't rush this, but that's where that's coming from. You know, they're used to, think about when they were going through sports even, or whatever things through school. I mean, it was always accomplishing and moving up and moving up. That's what they expect when they get to the workplace. So here's the goal, and this is how I'm going to end. It's basically about breaking down the barriers. So I'm going to give you 6 tips. Number 1, develop the relationship. More importantly than anything else is what are you doing to build that relationship with that individual? And by the way, I am not just speaking to us older generations to build those relationships with the younger generations. I'm going to be speaking to the younger generations, those Gen Z and those millennials. They need to start building relationships with us as well. It's a two-way street. Awareness and appreciation. Be aware we all have some unconscious bias. When I see a younger person or when they see an older person, there's things that are flooding our minds. We want to attack those biases. So be aware, though, that I may have those biases when I see that younger or older person, and then learn to appreciate. Avoid stereotyping. Stereotyping is what creates the barriers. Initiate dialogue. One of my favorite quotes is move from judgment to curiosity. And so right there on those postcards on the backside are some questions that you can use to start initiating a dialogue with that person, regardless of what generation they may be from. Learning from one another, one of the coolest things in a corporate environment or any organization is called mutual mentoring, where you, again, on all sides of this equation, get into a mentoring relationship. That I could be mentoring someone younger, and yet they also could be mentoring me. There's some things I could learn from them as well. And then obviously finding common ground, right? Instead of what divides us, what separates us, what makes us different, find ways in which, I think it's hilarious that, Gen Zers that are also into the Beatles, which don't throw anything. I was never that big into the Beatles personally. But music is a way that you can find common ground. There's all different ways, hobbies, activities, whatever it might be, but find that common ground. So again, what you'll see on the back of that card is we all want to belong. We all want to have purpose, be accepted, be seen and heard. We all want to be valued, and we all want to be elevated. This is what we crave, regardless of our generation. So the grade 8, that's what I call them. Those are the questions that you have there. These are just conversation starters. There's no magic to them other than it's a way for, doesn't matter who you are or what generation you come from, there's probably an answer, a cool story that you could share. So enjoy those. That is all I have, and I nailed it at 1 o'clock. So thank you.
Rob, you're going to stick around a little bit if anybody has any questions.
Sure. Yep.
Rob, in recognition of your time with us today, I want to present you. It's signing off.
This is kind of fun.
This rendition of the Rotary Wheel, which has our 4-way test on the back, and is made hopefully by the village. And Rob, I did do the math, so you're 4 years older than me, which means, I guess, according to your slide, we're different generations. But I don't think it's fair. You got that nice full head of hair. Genetics. I don't know what to say about that. Couple of quick announcements. Tomorrow night, we're having the wine tasting event at the Worcester Country Club from 6 to 8 p.m. Also, if you ordered apparel, that will be outside the room to pick up today as you leave. And next week, our speaker will be First Lady Fran DeWine with the talk of the Dolly Parton Imagination Library and the Ohio Governor's Imagination Library. So have a good week, Rotarians. We stand adjourned.